It's I was telling Archana how tense I am. Normally, I'm not, but I really am tense because the nerves go on the day, as any event. I asked somebody to prepare a dinner plan for 6 people, and believe me, it took far longer to prepare a plan for dinner for 6 people than a concert. So, 50% of your time is in the planning. But I'm so happy, really, that today's event, which is to follow soon, and the festival that will commence on the 13th, till the 30th is the first part of this festival. And the second part will be announced for July during the course of this festival. But to set the scene, I'd just like you to watch this 5-minute video, and then I'll tell you more about it. Thank you.
मोअज़्ज़िज़ नाज़रीन, आज इस फिल्म के साथ साथ वाडिया मूवी टोन आपकी खिदमत में अपना वैरायटीज प्रोग्राम नंबर 1 पेश करते हैं। सबसे पहले खान साहब सखावत हुसैन खां सरोद पर ठुमरी की एक गज़ल सुनाएंगे। हिंदुस्तान भर में सबसे बेहतर सरोद बजाने वालों में से खान साहब एक हैं। कलकत्ते की मशहूर व मारूफ गौहर जान मरहूमा के खास तबलिये फैयाज हुसैन खान साहब ने आपका साथ दिया है।
gentleman you saw on the video was Ustad Sakawat Hussain Khan. He is the grandfather, he was the grandfather of our guest artist of this season, Ustad Irfan Muhammad Khan, who is seated here. A very warm welcome to the reason why I decided to show this clip, because it's rare, it's 1937, and during the early 20th, 21st century period, I think about 100 years span, the music of the subcontinent was presented in the UK. But we don't have archival history, nor do we have information, but a lot of the musicians came from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh to perform at important functions in the UK. And up to 1947, when the independence took place, a lot of these musicians lost their patronage, and they went on their own to thrive in the larger community. But my talk is not about going deep into the whole ethos of our music or anything. These are just connections that I'm going to bring forward as to why the Shared Values Festival was conceived and how it is going to go forward. And this is the second edition of the festival. We had the first one in 2019, and we lost 2 years running. So finally, we have a chance to present some of the work in this festival. After the independence, there were few very important people who made a substantial contribution post 1947 to early around or mid 70s, and this gentleman, Aina Devangari, I regard him as one of my gurus because I was inspired by him. So during the period from 1947 to early 70s or late 60s, he brought some wonderful music to UK, and he has been the catalyst, a very important component figure between him, the Beatles, and Pandit Ravi Shankar. Because it was Aina Devangari who introduced Pandit Ravi Shankar to the Beatles, following a query from the High Commission, and the only person who could help the Beatles, it was in reference to a set of sitar strings, and Aina Devangari was the man to help the Beatles. So you can see the connection between Aina Devangari and the introduction of Ravi Shankar to the Beatles. But Aina Devangari was getting on with life, and his historic contribution has been archived under the Asian Music Circle, some remarkable body of work he had produced. And in 1970, when I arrived here, I was immediately attracted to the Sanskritic Festival, which was partly a festival that took over from the work of Aina Devangari. And as a young boy, I met Pandit Ravi Shankar and George Harrison and many other artists during the festival. And this particular festival was the blueprint of what was to come for 18 years. But somehow, round about mid-70s, 1977, I had an idea with the director of the Sanskrit Festival. Downstairs here in this precinct, there used to be the Center of Indian Arts. It was an 150-seater space, performance space, and the Center of Indian Arts, for whom I worked, regularly hosted concerts. But Mr. Shankar decided that he only wanted to do one festival a year, and that's it. But I was of the different opinion to form a regular concert series. So that's where I differed, and that's where I moved on. And then I set up the company that is still running. The foundation was laid in 1977. It's now almost 46 years to the year time that this setup was established. Now, what has happened in the last 46 years is that we have presented over 2,000 events, presented over 3,500 artists at over 500 venues. We've recorded and filmed nearly 3,700 hours of music and film. And most of the work was released through Navras Records. And now with the partnership with Sony India, a lot of those historic concerts are coming out as well. Now we curate 8 festivals a year. When you talk about festivals, people think, oh, big festivals. No, we don't present big festivals. Our festivals are small and inclusive and manageable and more personable than other festivals. So the idea is to take the festivals to the community. Rather than community coming to big concert halls, we decided that we should go to them. And that's how all the 8 festivals throughout the year are presented at almost 100 venues in the UK. Now these festivals, I'll name them for you. The String Fest, which has just finished, we had 20 concerts here at the Nehru Center. The Women in the Arts Festival, it lost its original place from April to November, so now we got one presentation in November. Khayal, Music and Imagination, Words, Music and Poetry, Mystic Voices, Rhythms in the Landscape, Jazz Yatra, and Shared Values. So, coming to Shared Values, why was this festival conceived? The reason is primarily that after the festivals and the explosion of Indian music in the United States and UK in the 60s, following the great meeting of the Beatles with Pandit Ravi Shankar, many great festivals were presented, the Woodstock, the Monterey, and there were more sitars sold in the United States and UK and other parts of Europe than in India. So many non-South Asians, people who came from different parts of the world other than the subcontinent, enjoyed the participation, attending concerts, and out of those few, many decided to study Indian music properly. They went to different gurus and they trained for 30, 40 years, as we have our other principal artist, Clem Alford, veteran of so many years, and he's seen more music than I've attended concerts. And he is the repository of anything of the last 50 years. You ask him, he will tell you historical facts about what had happened in the last 50 years. So in this festival, we refer to inclusivity. Inclusivity in such that these non-South Asian artists needed a platform to present their work. A lot of the producers I know would not take a risk. They said, no, we cannot risk it because we will not get an audience. I said, if you don't try, then how would you know? So I took upon the challenge and started this festival. And in this festival, we have some brilliant musicians who have contributed so much to music, but they did not have that platform. And with this occasion, we have 36 to 40 artists participating. And some of the principal concerts are performed by musicians who have achieved authentic level of expertise. And one could put a curtain and you will not know who is playing behind. So that kind of discrimination is something that I don't enjoy. I want to practice inclusivity, and I want to present what is correct. And that is how this festival's consensus is building. And we have some remarkable youngsters too in the in tonight's presentation. So in the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to invite some of our principal artists and participants to come and talk to us and talk to you about their life and history of their music, how they came into, and I would moderate the session. And after the session, we're going to have 3 recitals on rubab, the sarod, and the sitar. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our main artist, Ustad Irfan Muhammad Khan. Irfan Khan Sahab has just flown in from Kolkata, jet lag. He tells me that he had screaming children just around him, and he hadn't had a good sleep. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Khan Sahab. Irfan Muhammad Khan Sahab, that was his grandfather who was performing in the video. Now, you know, we know some well-known gharanas, the Maihar Gharana, the Bangash Gharana, but truly speaking, his is an unsung Gharana. We don't hear about Lucknow Shahjahanpur Gharana. You only hear of other Gharanas. But what we have in front of us is a repository of raga knowledge. He's one of the very few people who is the custodian of thousands of bandish compositions. And today we will talk about this. And our next guest is, I should really call him either a Pandit or an Ustad, Clem Alford from Scotland. Our third guest is a remarkable percussionist. I've been absolutely bowled over by his method and work ethics, and the energy that he brings to the stage is Samai D. Samai D, come. The next artist is Jonathan Meyer. Jonathan is the son of the late John Mayer, whom I had the great pleasure of working with and associated with many years. Unfortunately, many years ago he passed away. But Jonathan has got his father's genes, musical. And what Jonathan is, he's a combination of everything a musician should be. He's a composer, he's a sitarist, and he's still learning. So may I invite Jonathan Meyer on stage. We'll need one more chair, I think. Could you find one more chair, please? Yeah. So, which brings me down to the youngsters. I call them young tigers because we need them. They've sacrificed a lot at young age. And the three artists who are going to come on the stage one by one are remarkable musicians. At this age, they're showing prowess. So I'd like to invite Safwat Simab, a young Afghani rubab player. Yeah, you sit there. Yeah. Will the chair? Yes. I'll do it. Yeah. Just let the chair come. Our other young just put it on that side. Our other young artist is somebody remarkable. His name is Shayan Saqib. Shayan, come on stage. You know why I call him remarkable? Because I've been a Sarod student myself in the 70s. I have a Sarod. And my history into Indian music was through Sarod. But you know, in the early days, you know how you have to play with your cuticles. And the sign of blood just deterred me. But then, obviously, I was made for something else. So I started producing concerts. But Sarod and I have got this close affinity. And when I heard Shayan for the first time, I presented him here. I was immensely moved because so much training has gone into this young man. And his father, who is seated here, he's a remarkable man. I mean, you know, parental support is so important in this music. And Saqib Saab, who is seated here, as a young lad, used to attend all the concerts. He used to chase me up and down for videos and recordings. But you know, he was ahead of his time. Now everything that we do is captured. Video, camera shots and all that, without which we cannot share history. So he was ahead of his time, and luckily he has been surrounded by musicians, traditions. And he and his wife have inculcated so much, like my dear friend Rahmat Simab, who is seated here. I'll tell you more about him shortly. Parental support, I call it. He too has given Safwat what he needs. Apart from love as a son, he has to give love as a father, and a lot of things that go into making of a musician. And Rahmat Simab has gone further. He has made a beautiful place in Preston Road called the Music Room. In my 50 years, I have not seen a music room of that quality. And he has made this a small hideout. People ask me, where is it? I said, you just go to Preston Road and turn right of the station and you'll come to it. It sits about 80, it's intimate, but this is where we call proximity with the audience. They are so close to the artist that you are able to interact. So at the end of the concert, please talk to Mr. Rahmat Simab. He'll tell you number of concerts that are coming up. There's one on the 20th. So we needed that parental support. And for both Safwat and Shayan, parental support has been given. And the third young artist, what can I say? I mean, he has been thrown into the deep end. He is now performing with younger and senior artists at this level. And he has been tutored by none other than Ustad Shahbaz Hussain Khan, the most brilliant tabla player of UK. So may I please invite our final guest, Junaid Ali, on stage. So we only have 2 radio mics, so we will share and I'll be very quick. Khan Saab, the first question that I want to ask you, it's at the bottom.
Yeah.
The first question, what do you do, what impression do you get when a young musician from a different part of the world comes to you to learn music? What happens? What do you tell them?
It's a joyous moment because unfortunately in India now, young people are not into classical music anymore. As, as it was during my time or your time, everyone wants fame and overnight. They don't want to work. They don't want to labor hard. And when I get students from UK or Germany or other, they're willing to work. They're willing to work hard, and they listen to you, and they don't try to override what you're trying to teach them. And it's pleasure teaching them, believe me. And I don't belong to the old school of thought that we hide everything, don't teach them, this is for your son, or this is for your daughter. I don't believe in that. I teach openly. You'll be meeting Matthias and Marcos, and Pete is here, Peter Yelding. And Jonathan has started learning lately from me. A few lessons he's taking. And of course,
Shayan,
Shan's
Ustad,
Ustad Arnab is also my student, so it's pleasure teaching them.
So you are a Dada Guru of these young men.
Yes.
What a veneration, what a experience for him.
Yes.
Yeah?
Unfortunately, he's so busy, he will not be able to attend the retreat we are.
Well, I would say that's his loss. He has to make it up. By the way, what we are talking about is a very interesting retreat which is taking place from the 15th to the 19th, middle of nowhere. And we had number of students registered, but unfortunately due to commitment, I mean, Shine is becoming a doctor, so what more pressure can a doctor get in order to move forward? He can't sacrifice his medical career. So he was meant to come to the retreat, but somehow he's going to catch up, and I promise that he will. So you won't miss it, but we'll miss you. Khan Saab, you have been in the background, you have not, unlike other musicians and masters, you are relatively very shy, you do not project yourself, and you are the real unsung hero of our music tradition. But somehow, your music and your teaching took you to Afghanistan, and you taught many students in Afghanistan. Please, could you tell us your experience about Afghanistan?
There were 2 stints. First, I went in 1984, and from 1984 to 1987, I was there. I was sent by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs through ICCR, and I taught a lot of people there. They are now ustads in their own way. Some of them have migrated to other places. Some are still there in Afghanistan. Ehsan Irfan is one of them. He's doing quite well. Then there are some good, bad, and indifferent also. So one of them is in Australia, Khalil Gudaz. Some of them, unfortunately, were killed by the Taliban, who were doing very well.
This is the most tragic period.
Yes.
I mean, I learned just today that Ahmed Sarmast, who now has got all his music students and musicians in a retreat somewhere in Portugal,
Yes.
being protected. But he said something very profound, that every platform that he gets, he's going to speak about the musician's plight, to make sure government to government they talk about the plight of the musicians.
And the second stint was when MS Amos started his institute, ANIM, Afghanistan National Institute of Music. So he asked me to come over and said, please help us. And then I set up the Indian music section there. And I was there for 3 years, from 2010 to 2013.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Kanzab.
There's one more thing I want to go
Please.
back on. When you said musicians came to UK in the 40s and after independence, let me tell you, my great-great-grandfather was the first Indian musician who came to UK, and he performed at the Jubilee celebration of Queen Victoria in 1887.
Wow. So that's a historical part of what you
The
described.
conversation just got over for Charles, and
Yeah.
I wish I could have played and followed my great-grandfather's footsteps.
Well, you
but
might
it
you
was
might
not to
just
be.
do the next crowning,
If
or
I'm
maybe
around,
the current.
and if Saqib gets his medical degree, he will look after me.
Well, he's probably looking after you now. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, it's fascinating. One can go on for hours talking to you, but I just want to run through.
Yes, I understand.
Which brings me to Clem. Now, I've known Clem for 50 years, and he's also contributed so much in the field of Indian music, film scoring, and performing at different levels. And he's got a remarkable history. The question that I want to ask Clem is, what made him choose Indian music, and who were his early gurus that took him to where he's now?
Have we got enough time?
Yeah, carry on.
I first heard sitar, it must be in the mid-60s, something like that. Lots of Western musicians were experimenting with different instrumentation, and it was a different milieu then. The whole socio-political ambience in the UK was different. It was, the post-war generation, young people they were experimenting with different things, in their own lives and in culture and music, everything like that. So there was all these new developments going on. At that time, as Jay said, the Beatles were, George Harrison was dabbling with his different instrumentation in his recordings. And I heard one story that he was actually on a film set, and I think it's one of the movies they made. And there was some Indian musicians there, or something to do with India. They were participants in the film. And he wanted to, he saw this instrument and he wanted to use this in their recordings because they were doing all kinds of strange things. And he incorporated that into one of his tracks, and then he got fascinated by it, got hooked on it like I did. I got hooked on it just from listening to the sound, because we hadn't got that. I mean, I come from a completely different musical tradition. I mean, I was born in Scotland. I learned the bagpipes. Obviously, when I moved to London, I couldn't play the bagpipes in London. It's far too loud. And then I managed to, by accident, buy a sitar while I was living here. And I was fascinated. There was a book that came with it by one of Ravi Shankar's students. It must have been somebody who had been to India, had picked up one of these instruments while they were out there, just as they were doing when they went to Spain. They would buy a flamenco guitar and hang it on their wall. Anyway, this sitar was in the window, and I went in and I bought it. And this book was with it by, I can't remember, I think it was somebody, Hari Rao, one of Ravi Shankar's students.
Harihar Rao.
Harihar Rao, that's it.
From Los Angeles.
That's right. And this book was with it. And I tried to teach myself, but it's impossible. You need a guru or an ustad to teach you. You can't learn it in that academic way or on your own, like playing a day, kind of Bert Whedon-style guitar teaching book. So what happened was, I spent the next, I don't know how long, about a year and a half or something, looking for somebody to teach me. And then I came across something that introduced me to Deva Angadi through the Asian Music Circle.
Aina Devangadi,
yeah.
And
I wrote to his organization, Asian Music Circle, and I was asked, do you have any teachers for sitar, Indian music? And he got back to me and he gave me a couple of names. One was Jayashree Banerjee, Mrs. Jayashree Banerjee, who had come to the UK with her husband, who was doing something at the London University. And a man from East Africa who had left during the Idi Amin period, when there was the Africanization policy, and all the Indian workers in East Africa were all basically kicked out. And he came to London, and he was one of the names on the list. So I tried Mrs. Banerjee, but she'd gone back to India with her husband. So that was out. So I managed to get in touch with this man called Manish Kansara. And he said he had learned from his father, but basically his father and a bit of self-tuition. And he played quite nicely. But I later looked at him in the sense that his technique was wanting a bit on the faster sections. So I wrote to Mrs. By accident, I went to the Beatles shop in Baker Street then. And there was an album in there, old vinyl one, with Mrs. Banerjee's recording on it. I thought, I know the name. So I wrote off to her father, and her father replied to me and said, yes, you come, I'll teach you free of charge. You live in the old Guru Shishya Parampara type environment, and I'll teach you. You come for a minimum of 6 months. So I wrote to him, and that was it. He said, come. So I went, which was an overland trip because I had very little cash at the time. So I sort of hitchhiked through Europe and Middle East and finally into India. And he welcomed me with open arms. And I'll never forget, this is the one thing that always intrigued me when I arrived there, that his house, at the top of his house he had a veena that the architect had built in as part of the design. And then as soon as I walked into his front room, all the instruments were there, and the atmosphere was just music. It's fantastic. It was like a physical, living thing, this whole atmosphere of music. And this is out in the countryside. This is not in Calcutta itself. This was in West Bengal, in the rural area. So in a sense, it was like Ravi Shankar went to Maiha. There's very little in Maiha. This was Maya in Midnipur, in West Bengal. So I stayed with him. Actually, it was supposed to be just for a few months, but then I stayed. Eventually, it was 2 years in all, in total. And I lived, I lived like a shisha, Indian shisha would live. But the problem is, you see, they couldn't do that anymore because India was changing. People had to work, so they couldn't spend all these years with their ustad or with their guru, It was very difficult. It wasn't real.
Sorry to interrupt,
No.
but the whole ethos of Guru Shishya Parampara is now exiting. Exiting. We have what is known as the YouTube Gharana. This Gharana is so voluminous that any access you need, you just have to Google. So what happens to the gurus? Especially we have Irfan Muhammad Khan Sahab, we have Clem as well. The traditional role of teacher is diminishing too. Now, Clem has said that it was diminishing when he was learning. You can imagine 50 years later, it's just vanishing. You're getting a tail end of this tradition. And it's very scary because how do you grip the sitar or the sarod and to know the nuances of each note? You can only do so in person, face to face. And no Zoom class can ever replicate a direct one-to-one. And that is one reason why this is so interactive. Even concerts have to be interactive. If there is no wawa, a musician will feel displeased that if you say that people are not appreciating his music. And ours is an oral tradition where wawas are appreciating music is so fundamental. It's an integral part of music listening. Which now brings me to an interesting encounter that I've had with this young, masterful drummer. You should just see his video. My God. The way he recites those Carnatic bowls, it's remarkable. And to be dedicated in learning this very powerful percussion tradition, and that too of South India. And by the way, the permutations in Carnatic rhythm tradition is so huge. So I'd like to hear from Samay, where did you find this interest? From where? How did it happen? And what took you into the Carnatic music?
Namaskaram, everyone. My name is Siami D. From my mom's side, I'm Brazilian. From my dad's side, I'm Congolese. I was raised in Africa, raised mostly in France and Belgium. Je parle le français. And what happened, my musical journey, I studied Western classical, which is classical music, the Western classical music, percussion. Then the drum set, and when I was 16, I turned into jazz, and I carried on my journey. And I became a professional musician already in France, but I moved here because I had more opportunity to work in England. And so I'm mostly known as a jazz musician. About 13 years ago, I had the chance
Yes.
to perform with Hindustani players, tabla, sarangi, and a guitarist. And I felt this. I never worked with a musician who was so spiritual, so skilled, and so kind. And accepting to everything what was happening musically, they took it, absorbed it, and sent it to me. It never really happened. And I don't mean Western musicians are bad or not kind. No, that was just a different type of energy. And from that experience, I felt one of the three musicians became my close friend. One of them is the godfather of my son. And I asked Alpesh, the tabla player, what should I do? And he said, study Carnatic music. And so that means you're going to learn the konokol, you're going to learn the rhythm, and you'll be fine. Okay, so this is what I did. And so I went to the Bhavan, the School of Indian Music and Art, and I met what would become my guru. I thought I was really presumptuous because as a professional musician, you assume I'll be fine. And so I went thinking I'm going to have a few lessons and then I'll be able to play. Oh, I was wrong. I was so wrong. And everything was so different from the West. And it was highly complex. And also the recitation. I spent so much time to say, kita takatari kita tom, kita takatari kita tom. I was saying, daga, 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 daga. My guru was like, Siami, if you recite the wrong way, they're never going to understand you in India. And I was like, it's just recitation. I'll be fine on the drums. No, you have to recite properly. So everything was really dissected like I never had in the West. And from that, my wife, lucky, I'm so grateful to have a partner who told me, Sammy, just take your time, enjoy the process. And she could see the change in me, being less jaded. You know, when you're a professional musician, you run for the money, the opportunity, the next situation as a freelancer. She saw the change because of the connection I had with my guru. My guru is Shriyam Balachandar from the Bhavan, the Carnatic maestro.
Sammy, let me stop you here. His teacher is a very dear friend. The first time he came to UK, was part of the all-night concert in 1994 at the Festival Hall. And after he came to UK, the Bhavan invited him to be the teacher. And since 94, he's the principal percussion teacher, Carnatic teacher. And he's a remarkable teacher. He's precision musician.
Absolutely. And also extremely strict, firm, and extremely kind. And I spent so much time at the Bhavan just relaxing and learning different type of rhythm. And now I feel like I'm a better musician, and I also respect the spirituality of music.
Thank you. It occurs to me that we are blessed with so many great teachers in the UK. And to be able to connect with them is so important. And that's why I say that we are blessed with so many young students who have trained under these masters. And one such person whom I want to bring into this conversation is Jonathan Mayer, who fortunately born into a musical family, but has carved a separate identity to his father. Jonathan, let's